I think it's really important too to talk to your birth partner about what to expect. They don't know exactly what to expect. Just like when we were talking about birth and like, listen to this podcast and, do this part of the birth course with me, practice labor relaxation and understand what's happening inside so that when I'm saying these things out loud, I'm at this part of labor and it's okay and normal, right? They don't understand what's going to be happening postpartum. And like, spoiler alert, neither do you, especially if it's that first baby. So working to understand that together, like mood changes, physical needs, mental exhaustion, like trying to figure out breastfeeding and all that kind of stuff, knowing that can help them. All right, it's that time. Let's hear from our reviewer of the week. This one is Smiley Riley, and she says, empowering and informative. This podcast was one of the most fantastic resources throughout my entire pregnancy and helped me feel very prepared and informed ahead of my birth this past spring. I had a spectacular birth experience and was able to navigate conversations with my providers confidently to ensure that my baby and I were safe, but that my preferences and values were adhered to and respected. I showed this podcast to my doula and will continue telling friends and family about it any chance I get. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I love that you guys are listening and doing things with it. It is my favorite part about what I do is when I get some kind of response, whether it's in the way of a testimony like this one, or somebody emailing me or shooting me a DM and just telling me like, hey, this is what I grabbed from the podcast and thank you for what you do. And this is the experience that I had. That is my absolute favorite part, is to see you guys using it, utilizing it, and reaping the benefits of the information that's out there. This is all of the stuff that I love and preach because of the experiences that I've had myself. So I love what I do. I love that I get to talk to you guys on here. The only thing that makes me sad is I'm talking to you, but I can't talk back to you. I do like when you guys dive into the birth course and we can have a little bit of more of a chat there, like on the comments back and forth or when you DM me and all that stuff. But man, how I wish we could just be in a room together and we could all chat and lean on each other's birth experiences and just learn from one another. So that's the only bummer about podcasting, is you guys get to hear from me, but I can't hear you back. So this week, this podcast episode, I hope it's going to be really helpful for moms who are currently pregnant and or immediately postpartum, but probably pregnant and planning for your postpartum experience. If you are listening and you are postpartum and you hear some things here today that you're like, oh shoot, I wish I would have known that, or oh yes, that is true. I did that thing. That's really helpful. I want to remember that for next time. Then I hope this is great for you too. I want to talk a little bit today kind of about the nitty gritty of postpartum, and I won't go too deep and too far because really it's like after you have your baby and the nurse comes in and they tell you all of the things, right? Like, you're going to be bleeding for this long and make sure you watch out for this and and they start rattling everything off and and your baby. And let me tell you about all these things. And you're like, like, I just gave birth. I'm exhausted. I have no idea what you're saying. I'm in love with my baby. Nursing is hurting. Like, your head's all over the place. So this is one of those episodes that you can listen to and listen again and then tuck away for when you need it, come back to it and grab all the good information that you can possibly find in it. But in regards to postpartum today, okay, and like fun fact here, I'll just tell you guys. So this has nothing to do with postpartum. Here's just a fun fact about my life. I used to record these episodes just all over the place. Like, I would have several slots during the week and I would interview with people and like whatever else. Now I do like 2 bigger days during the month. And occasionally if somebody has like a weird schedule and they need me to find a different time, then we'll do that. My kids, we have a rule in our house. This is just a random fact for life, okay? That if all of your schoolwork is done, we homeschool. So if all of the schoolwork that I said needs to be done is done, and your room is clean and the home is clean, meaning dishes are done, home's vacuumed or put away, like whatever that looks like, totally clean, then on Friday and Saturday, you can have an hour each. And I actually do an hour 15 because they argue with me that it takes them time to find the game and connect to whatever else. They can have an hour 15 of game time on Friday and Saturday. Here's the exception. When I podcast, which sometimes can be for like 6 hours in a day, They are like, yes, mom's podcasting. We're going to run to our room and play our games and whatever else. So they are living it up. But it also makes me, with these solo episodes, give you a little slimmer of a picking here. Sometimes I get into it, but sometimes I'm like, okay, these kids need to get off of screens and do something else. And no, they don't necessarily play on the screens the entire time in there, but it is a day where they get more than an hour and they are so happy. Don't ask me why I just shared that with you, but there you are. Okay. Let's talk about postpartum just for a minute here. So kind of what I want to go over today is what to expect in those first few days and weeks when you are postpartum, what you should do to prepare for your postpartum for when you're in that nitty-gritty time, and kind of the things that you wish that somebody would tell you beforehand. So that is what I'm going to be doing for you today. I think when we start this off, one of the things I want to talk about is what to expect once you're home, in your body with your new little baby. There are the immediate stuff that happens in the hospital and things. I'm pretty sure I've covered a lot on here. And if you're listening and you're new and you're like, wait, I need that information, I'm going to put a podcast or two down in the show notes that you can reference for like that immediate postpartum. Things that we discussed, like baby vaccines and immediate skin to skin and the delivery of the placenta, like all that kind of stuff. But I want to talk about like you being in your body, in your home, and what that looks like for you postpartum. So as far as moms go for the support that they get, particularly if you're in a hospital setting, the support that you get is going to be good. Somebody is checking your blood pressure. They're changing any pads for you. They're helping with breastfeeding potentially. They're making sure you get a shower and that you've eaten food. A day or two after that, when you're home, nobody does that unless you ask them to. So remember when you get home, and this is whether you've had a vaginal birth or a cesarean birth, you're going to have some bleeding. You have a wound basically the size of a dinner plate. And obviously, anyways, it like gets shrunk up on itself and whatever else. But if you were to spread that thing out, it's nice and big. And so that means that you're going to be bleeding. And I remember being so annoyed when I had my cesarean because I'm like, come on. Like I just went through all this surgery and like, doesn't the blood like get cleared out? And that's not exactly how it works. Like you still have to shed all this stuff. And it's totally normal to have bleeding. So it's just a reminder to have nice big maxi pads ready for you at home. I'm actually going to include with this episode a download to our postpartum workbook or postpartum guide. I don't want to say workbook. That makes it sound like a whole course workbook, but it's a guide and it's several pages of really detailed information on how to help you get set up for your postpartum and just things that you need for you and baby. And it's not just items. It's like keeping track of diapers and like how to set up your nursing station and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to include that as a download within this episode as well. So make sure to check the show notes today. So you'll get sent home from the hospital, generally with like really big, crazy maxi pads and some mesh underwear. I know a lot of women love them. And yes, they're like comfy in the sense that they're not like binding and restricting in any way, but I'm always more comfortable in my own underwear. So when I get home, I just have really big, thick maxi pads. And I have a couple different sizes, right? So I have the like overnights, and then I've got for when things get a little bit slower and slower and slower. So those first couple days, that first week is probably going to be really heavy. It's actually even normal to be passing some blood clots. As long as they're not bigger than the size of a golf ball and not several of them, you're not feeling lightheaded, there's other signs I'm going to give you to look for. As long as that is the case, some passing of blood clots that are rather large can be totally normal and just part of the process of clearing out. So you're just going to want to make sure in your bathroom station or wherever you need that you've got a couple places where you can get a hold of some of these items pretty quick and easy, including I would include in that bathroom area, not just the maxi pads, but a couple changes of underwear in case things go over and you have to change that as well. So keep that in mind. Now, after that bleeding slows down, things become a little bit easier. It gets a little lighter. You can use those lighter pads. You want to make sure that you remember there's nothing inside of the vagina during this time. So especially in the way of like tampons, and we're not having sex yet. But those kinds of things can irritate or possibly cause infection. So nothing in the vagina. It's not like you're going to want to be sticking anything in there anyways. It's probably going to be pretty tender and you want to leave it alone as it is. It's very normal for you, like as you're standing up out of bed or from a sitting position, to feel like a gush. If you are not somebody who has had heavy periods, that might feel a little alarming to you, but I promise you it is totally normal for you to experience that, especially early on. Within those first 6 weeks, the bleeding should be over pretty close to the 6-week mark. For most or a lot of women, kind of like an on average is even like 3, 4, 5 weeks, all within that area is very normal to stop bleeding. So keep that in mind. If you are noticing that the bleeding is getting lighter, maybe it's like almost done, and then all of a sudden it kind of comes back, that's really just an indicator to you to pay attention to the amount of activity that you are doing at the time. A lot of times we're good about like being restful for a while, and then the second we realize we are healing and we've got some energy, like I got to get out of this house, or I'm going to get up and vacuum my house or clean whatever, that just the like extra movement and stuff can cause a little bit more bleeding. So you get to gauge that. But if the bleeding does increase and it continues to increase, that's probably because you're doing a little bit too much. Now, if you hit that 6-week mark and bleeding has not stopped or slowed down, first of all, if that is the case, it's not stopping or slowing down at all, you might want to give your provider a call early on around the 4-week mark, depending on what's happening with you. If you are noticing large blood clots and heavy bleeding, even early on, that's like not slowing or stopping, those could be a sign of like maybe something's up, especially with any kind of pain, cramping, swelling, any fevers, anything like that. In an instant like that, it might be something like there is a piece of placenta that's still in there and you need to be back to the provider, maybe a DNC, something like that. There could be a bigger issue there. So those are conversations to have with your provider before you hit that 6-week period. Here's the tricky part. Here in the United States, this is just the common way that we do things. Moms go to the hospital, they have their baby, and then they don't see their provider until the 6-week checkup. There is a ton of stuff that happens during that time. Bleeding is just one of it. You're also breastfeeding, you're recovering from whatever was going on. There's the emotional and mental load. There's a lot that's happening for mom, but there's not somebody checking in with you along the way. Unless if you are not in a hospital setting and you have an out-of-hospital midwife, they come and check on you pretty regularly and almost like within 24 hours after birth, and then a couple days, and then they call. And anyways, they've got a good gauge. If you have a doula, even if you are in a hospital, this is somebody that will see you pretty soon after you have your baby, within a couple of days or within a week. That can be a great person that checks on you and like, hey, like, me as a doula, when I do this postpartum check-in, I'm talking to mom and I just go head to toe and I just ask them like, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me about the birth, and then we like head down, like, tell me how you're thinking about your baby, and then to your mouth, right? What are you eating and how are your breasts doing? And you just move down the body. But if you don't have somebody doing that with you, and especially if it's your first baby, it can be a little tricky to know like what's normal, what's not, what needs attention, what doesn't. Am I like mentally in a good space or do I need some support? So having somebody that can check on you like that is really important. Obviously, family and friends, making sure that you're like physically okay. Your husband or birth partner that can say like emotionally how you're doing. But outside sources tend to be a really great place to look because they're going to catch things that people that are really close to you may or may not. So also a postpartum doula, if you have somebody come in and help with any kind of stuff postpartum, that's another person that can like catch some stuff early on. But back to the bleeding, if you are having any of those issues where it's like heavy bleeding, lots of clotting, you're not feeling right, any pain, fevers, anything like that, that's when you call the provider. Making sure that when you change your pad, you're doing so regularly. And I will tell you this right now, because I did this all wrong with all 3 babies. Use the peri bottle. I know I've said this before, and it blows my mind that like I never caught on or like nobody told me 3 babies. But the peri bottle is so you can rinse your downstairs area and not have to wipe with toilet paper after you use the bathroom. That goes for number 1 and number 2. So you can just spray that down there, and I'll include a link for the peri bottle. They have them now that has like the little like curved, it's got like a curved plastic piece on it. So you can do it upside down instead of like trying to squirt and get it in the right place. Anyways, it can just be a little funky. This makes it a lot easier. If you are soaking more than a pad an hour, that's time to head to your care provider. If they're open and it's daytime, you can call, let them know what's going on and have them work with you over the phone. If it's not and it's a weekend or something like that, you would head to the ER. But again, you can call the ER and talk with the people there. Likely they're going to have you come in. Or if your provider has like an after hours number, you can call that before going in, unless it's like you can tell it's really urgent, you need to head out. But yes, your bleeding should get less and less heavy as the weeks pass and should fully stop by that 6-week mark. So if you notice that it hasn't or it's picked back up, go back to kind of what I had said before. Now, as far as bathroom trips go, this is something that I don't know. I don't remember being told if somebody did tell me, but I'm telling you right now, make sure that you go number 2 and let's make it comfortable. So some people will take stool softeners, even during pregnancy. I know I did with my first because my prenatal vitamin made me all kinds of stopped up, which is just so fun. But I realized later that there are other things that we can do, right? Like, are you eating enough green leafy vegetables, getting enough fiber, that kind of stuff. And you can also add something called magnesium citrate. So if you're not looking to do a stool softener, but you're looking for like a, I don't want to say herbal remedy, but like a more natural remedy, then that's something that you can take along with that. But if it's like been 5 days and you haven't gone number 2, it's going to not feel great when you go to do it. So try to make sure that things are moving right away. I think after my first, I had like a bag of prunes that I was eating and stuff postpartum. I was just like, I do not want to have to push another thing out of that area because it is pretty sensitive. All right, now let's talk about moods. This is probably one of the things. Okay, so as we know it right now, postpartum depression or postpartum mood disorders get diagnosed very rarely. The percentage is low, and even with the percentage that it's at, they're saying that those are the women that are actually mentioning that something is wrong. So there's plenty of women, myself included, who did not feel comfortable talking to their provider about it. So I didn't dare mention things like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, any kind of mood disorder like that. I didn't feel like they were going to hear me right. And I kind of had that experience with my first during pregnancy when I was having kind of like darker thoughts and this like heavy weight of depression over me that I had never experienced before. And they were kind of like, well, are you going to hurt yourself? And, I'm like, no, well, there's not much we can do for you unless you want to be on an antidepressant. And I was like, okay, like, no, why are those the only options? So anyways, I want to talk to you a little bit about baby blues versus like postpartum depression or anxiety or some kind of mood disorder. So there's a lot of hormones happening during pregnancy and birth itself and the postpartum period. So once that placenta detaches, it sends a signal to your brain that it's like, baby is here. So now we go into this like other mode of doing things, right? Like our breasts are getting ready to make milk. That's why in a couple of days, within 72 hours, that breast milk is supposed to come in. That's also like as your breast milk comes in, that's also the time that we see the biggest dip in oxytocin. And that dip, that massive dip in hormones can trigger all kinds of things, one of which would be called baby blues. And this is that feeling of like where you're weeping and crying over essentially nothing. You're irritable, you're really tired, you've got mood swings, you have trouble making decisions, and it lasts for about 2 weeks postpartum. If that kind of thing continues and you start to experience like feelings of hopelessness, if you have panic attacks where you can't feel joy, you have obsessive or intrusive thoughts, you have fear of something happening to your baby or thoughts of self-harm, that's where we move into this isn't just baby blues. We're looking at some postpartum anxiety or depression or other mood disorder, and it's time to reach out for help. Now, the important thing, if you are listening to me here and you are pregnant, is that you have somebody that you can reach out to postpartum that is probably not just your OB or your provider. Maybe like a home birth midwife or out of hospital midwife. That person may have some pretty good resources. And it's not to say that your OB and midwife won't. In fact, that's a great conversation and question to ask them now. If I'm experiencing these things postpartum, because I know that this is something that can happen, what do you do for that? And if they're like, well, we would get you on antidepressants or whatever if it doesn't match up with what you're looking for, then reach out to somebody else. But I would say find some either postpartum specialists or some kind of counselor, talk therapy, or somebody who deals specifically with postpartum women that you can lean on and go to and find some help, because there are herbal remedies and journaling exercises and herbs and like all different kinds of things that you can do before going straight for medication, which when it is time and the correct, all the boxes are checked and that makes sense, then that's a wonderful thing. But jumping to that immediately might not be what you need. And so somebody who is familiar with these things and can kind of walk you through some different processes, that is probably going to be a really good fit for a postpartum mom versus just let's get some medication. Now, obviously, if you're someone who has experienced depression or anxiety or anything like that prior, and you were on medication before, whether or not you took it during pregnancy, that could be a different situation. So please understand that as I'm saying these things, this is for all moms. And you're going to know your body best and what you need. But making sure that you have contact for somebody like that prior to being postpartum is going to make it easier to reach back out to them when you need help. So I would just have somebody that you can talk to. Also, I want to say here that your ability to mother is not related to how you're feeling postpartum. So just because you're feeling all those things does not make you a bad mother, does not mean you're going to be a bad mother. And the fact that you are thinking about these things and concerned about, how it's affecting you as a mom and as a person means that you have a desire to do something about it. And that is a positive thing. So keep in mind, it does not make you any less of a mother. Now, some other things that you can expect postpartum, and maybe you've actually experienced this during pregnancy, one of which is leaky boobs. That can be really fun. Some of you might be leaking colostrum right now as we speak, and others won't have any of that, but it's pretty common postpartum, especially first-time moms, because those breasts are trying to figure out, like, how much do I have to hold here? I haven't done this before. It goes through this whole trying to figure things out phase, and leaking is often a part of the process. If you don't have leaky boobs, that can be normal for you, and that's okay too. It doesn't mean anything is wrong. It's just a very common thing that we see, and so there's some recommendations there. Things that you can do for leaky boobs include like having a pad, some kind of pad that's in there. They have disposable ones. They have some pads that collect the milk, and you can take that milk and pour it into a bottle and use it later, freeze it, do whatever. And then they have the cloth ones, which I actually used that. Not knowing that it could potentially cause some yeast issues. But if you know that ahead of time, and you can make sure that they are washed well and whatever else, and that you can be aware of any yeast issues. I did not have any issues, so I actually loved them, and I didn't leak a ton, so they didn't like pour all over the place. Then the cloth ones could be a good option for you too. If I would have known about the ones that collect milk, that probably would have been a good option for me, because I did not make a ton of milk. I certainly couldn't pump a ton of milk. And I only leaked like at the beginning of after having my first baby, because my boobs figured it out pretty quick. And then they were like, you can make milk and go back down to an A cup. That's lucky for you, right? Okay. Night sweats are another one. So really common, whether or not you've been medicated or unmedicated. But I will say from personal experience and from seeing other women as well, oftentimes if you've had any kind of like IV fluids and medication in the hospital in the way of like an epidural or anything to like take the edge off, quote unquote, like a narcotic, anything like that, sweating those things out seems to be a little heavier when you've had the IV medications. However, you can still wake up in a complete pool of sweat, having none of that, and that can be totally normal as well. Fluctuation of hormones, releasing water, all kinds of stuff. Your body's doing all kinds of things, so it's really common. Just be prepared to change your sheets once or twice, so it wouldn't hurt to grab like a quick, cheaper set of sheets just to have it if you only have like the one or two. Being hungry all the time is another one. I remember when I first had my baby and I was like first breastfeeding, especially when I went to nurse, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm parched as heck. I'm hungry all the time. Or you might not be hungry at all. Like it's a fluctuation for you, right? But being hungry a lot, especially when you're nursing, being thirsty a lot is like really common. And that can go along with the hormones and all of that stuff, like you're losing all the water and you're losing weight and just everything that's happening with your body. You're just trying to like regulate. So that's pretty common. With all of that in mind, how can you prepare? first thing I want you to do is I want you to download that workbook that I'm going to include, or that guide that I'll include within this episode. Next, I want you to think about all the preparation that we do in preparing for birth. The other thing that I will tell you right now, so if you don't know, we now have a My Essential Birth Postpartum course. It's going to take you everywhere from the decisions that you make right before birth and like immediately postpartum all the way through to about a year of your baby. And it doesn't cover every single thing in a year, but it will cover those big things like milestones and breastfeeding and what to expect from your baby and your body during that time. So here's the thing. For women who have taken the birth course, this was kind of the number one comment that I hear back. Like, I am totally prepared for birth. It is everything that I could ever want. I was so excited. And then I got to the postpartum and it was like, we've got breastfeeding and sleeping schedules and what should I be eating and how often should my baby be nursing, or if I'm formula feeding, what nipples do I use, and all this kinds of stuff. So we do all this preparation for birth, and then it's easy to forget about the postpartum. But then once you're in it, once birth is over, you're immediately in it. So if any of this is something that you would like more information about, or you're interested in getting a little bit more knowledgeable about any of these topics prior to having your baby, or to just have it on hand for postpartum, myessentialbirth.com, and click on at the top, it says new postpartum course. At least that's how it is right now. Who knows? I might be redoing the website. But for now, that's where it is. Or you can go to myessentialbirth.com/postpartum. If you're listening and you haven't purchased the birth course, but you're interested in grabbing the birth course, you can bundle the two at checkout, and there's like a great discount if you do that. So just go to myessentialbirth.com, click the Get Started button, read through all of that, and during checkout, you can add on the postpartum course. But let's talk about some of the ways that you can prepare, things that you can do now and today, just from listening to this podcast episode without having to purchase anything. First of all, it's really easy. I think we do like baby showers and all this stuff, right? So like the physical part of things is really easy for some of us to prepare for, right? We've got a lot of help. People can give us meals postpartum and get stuff for the baby. We've got outfits and toys and all of that fun kind of stuff. It's really easy for mom to get overlooked though. And it's okay. Nobody's doing it on purpose. We don't mean anything mean by that. But it is something that we need to be aware of, because it's easy for us to forget ourselves too. Because as soon as baby's here, it is all about them, and happily about them. And we can kind of forget our needs during that time. So if you're struggling, even right now, to try and figure that out, keep listening, because this is where I want you to be with me in that preparation for postpartum. So one of the things we talk about in the course, and something that I've mentioned here today, and something that'll be mentioned within that guide that you can download today, is stations. So I talked about diaper station. Actually, I talked about just mommy station, right? Like the bathroom station where you've got your pads. Maybe you've got any kind of like postpartum like spray, that like a perineal spray that you're using downstairs, your peri bottle, extra underwear, like any of that stuff's going to be like in your bathroom. But there's also diaper stations and nursing stations. So those are really great in setting up kind of a stress-free environment. And it gives you opportunities to just have what you need wherever you end up. So like for a diaper station, it's not just where you're changing your baby. It's like wherever you end up with your baby, right? And it has diapers and wipes and ointment and cream and whatever else that baby is going to need in the way of changing a diaper. And then you've got your nursing stations. So that could be like your breast pads and lanolin, or whatever you use for your nipples, any kind of nipple cream. It could have a phone charger, snacks and food, just anything that's going to keep you comfortable during that time. Books, whatever you can think of. And the best part about it is you can do these like cute little rolling carts. It can be a little basket. Like it's whatever you want it to be. It can be so simple and so cheap, but then everything is just in one spot, so you don't have to think about it. And it might take you a time or two to be like, oh, shoot, I wish I had this here. I wish I had that here, especially first time moms, right? But you'll get that the first couple times, and then you can just pack it right in. In case you're wondering what any of those things might be, though, it's in the guide. So go ahead and take a look there. I think once you get to thinking about like, where are the places where I'm going to be nursing my baby, holding my baby, feeding, any of that stuff, that's just, you just kind of plop stuff wherever. So you've got it everywhere that you need it to be. But some examples might be like diapers and wipes, burp clots, changes of clothes for baby. That might not be something you're thinking about, but definitely with the diaper station, blowouts are a very real thing. Have a change of clothes there. Nipple pads, nipple balm, snacks. We talked about that. Water, cold water preferably would be like awesome. I'm like, in my later years, a mini fridge next to my bed would be delightful. Like that sounds amazing. Water bottles, reusable tumbler, anything else that you think you need. Like I said, chargers and books and all that kind of stuff. And then things that you can put in that bathroom one. I glanced on this for a moment, but peri bottle, pads and adult diapers, that numbing spray, any hemorrhoid cream or medicated pads, and then changes of underwear would be an extra thing that you can put in there. I think it's really important too to talk to your birth partner about what to expect. They don't know exactly what to expect. Just like when we were talking about birth and like, listen to this podcast and, do this part of the birth course with me, practice labor relaxation and understand what's happening inside so that when I'm saying these things out loud, I'm at this part of labor and it's okay and normal, right? They don't understand what's going to be happening postpartum. And like, spoiler alert, neither do you, especially if it's that first baby. So working to understand that together, like mood changes, physical needs, mental exhaustion, like trying to figure out breastfeeding and all that kind of stuff, knowing that can help them. So, and it's going to give them, especially, I feel like men are so good at when they know what to do, doing it well. And really being protectors of our space. Like men are naturally protectors. They're naturally fixers. And so if we give them those things to do, they feel accomplished. We feel provided for. It's a really great balance. So talking about how your relationship can change, talking about what your needs are while you're recovering. That can be in the way of like cooking and cleaning and dealing with visitors. And it doesn't mean it all needs to fall on them. It's just that these things are going to have to happen postpartum. And so how can you guys work together to make sure that either you have the help that you need or that he has a list of stuff that he can do, right? Also, if you have the opportunity to meal prep and stock your freezers, that can be a great thing too. And it gives you something to do together. But having like extra meals, and I mean, in the event that like, yes, people are offering to bring food, but like you don't want to see anybody, like you just like it to be quiet in your home and you need to eat. Like those are wonderful, wonderful things to do. Also, doing them prior gives you opportunity to make sure that they're like really healthy and good, nourishing meals for when you are postpartum, which it's great if somebody wants to drop by a pizza and that might be exactly what sounds good to you. And it might just lift your spirits and your body. It could be wonderful all around. And you might need something a little bit healthier. And maybe you don't feel like you can ask for that, or it's not somebody that has the availability to do that. Whatever the case, making a couple of meals that are really nourishing and good for you postpartum while you're still pregnant can be a really good way to go. I think postpartum is obviously going to bring a lot of changes. So this is where if you don't know your village yet, now's the time to figure that out. And if you don't have one for whatever reason, sometimes it can be you move around a lot, you just moved somewhere new, military and people are here and there, whatever the case might be. If you don't have that village, you have to create one. And maybe that looks like a postpartum doula. Maybe that looks like people that you can, even the way that things are set up now, depending on which country you're living in and all that kind of thing. Like here in the United States, right? We've got Grubhub and DoorDash and all these things that even my mom from another state can call in and send me stuff, and Instacart and Amazon and whatever. So like some of those physical things can be met. As far as the relationship kind of stuff, again, if you don't have people nearby, that's a lot of FaceTime and phone calls and checking in with people. But preferably having somebody that you can see face to face that can physically look at you and say, you're doing great, or what's going on here? That can be really helpful. And obviously like your birth partner, any grandparents or friends, or in my case, like we use a lot of church community. Like people are going to come. If I were to have a baby right now, you guys, don't get me started. It's been a constant conversation in my life for the last many years now. But anyways, if I were to do that right now, like my church community is who is around me in this space here. And they would be coming and bringing meals and coming and hanging out and coming and taking children and coming and cleaning my house. And I would do the same for them. And so like getting involved in some kind of community where you have that kind of support is really important. But again, if you do not have that, really think about hiring a postpartum doula and maybe ask people who are not around to help contribute and support you in that way. I think joining any kind of new moms or parenting groups, I mentioned church, even if you don't go to churches local to you currently, like get started in it, meet some people, go to the church communities. I think that's a great place to meet people. Another one is La Leche League. This is great for postpartum. I highly recommend attending a La Leche League meeting before you have your baby. See what it feels like to be there. See like what the situation is, who the teachers are, what the women are like. I promise you're going to like it. And then you'll feel more comfortable whether or not you need breastfeeding help or not. But you'll feel more comfortable going back into that space just to connect with other women. And if you are breastfeeding, then postpartum, it's just a great place for you guys to find other people that are also doing that and kind of that community for moms. Remember to give yourself a lot of grace. Postpartum is not for the faint of heart, and there is a lot that happens to us. It's not pretty. It's not, it can be a little messy for sure. And that can be totally normal. And it's just really important for us to trust the process here. Don't feel like you need to jump up and be all prettied out on Instagram or making dinner for your family or getting out of the house or going back to work immediately. All of those things have their time and place, but it's okay to be in your pajamas the majority of the day with a nightstand full of snack wrappers and everything else that you've eaten. Like, it's okay. It's okay to just be for a moment. So there's your permission to just be postpartum, enjoy your baby. Don't stress about the other things. And as much as you can, lean on that village. If you can create that village before you are postpartum, you will have a leg up. For sure. So it's just like I tell you guys, interview pediatricians before you have your baby, interview your providers while you're pregnant and all of that kind of stuff. Preparing those things in advance is going to give you so much more confidence in what you are doing, and it'll help you be so much more calm. So that was kind of here's the nitty gritty of postpartum to get you started. Obviously, like I said, we have the guide. It's totally free, downloadable within the show notes here. And if you are interested at all in the postpartum course, go check it out. It is myessentialbirth.com/postpartum, and it'll tell you everything that is involved from those first couple days all the way through like exercising and nutrition and breastfeeding and how to feed yourself and take care of yourself, what's normal for your baby, all the good stuff. It's all there. If you have questions, it's probably been answered there because we reached out to a ton of you and made sure that we got everything that you wanted within that course. So with that, I hope you have an incredible postpartum, and I will see you next week.